Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So July 26, 2024, Radha Govinda Temple in Brooklyn, New York. And we're reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 32, Entanglement and Fruitive Activities, text 34 to 36. By performing fruitive activities and sacrifices, by distributing charity, I'm going to ask you afterwards what some of these are without looking, okay? So let's start again. By performing fruitive activities and sacrifices. No, just listen. By distributing charity, by performing austerities, by studying various literatures, by conducting philosophical research, by controlling the mind, by subduing the senses, by accepting the renounced order of life, and by performing the prescribed duties of one's social order. Now, we can speak on each of these for a month or two, right? By performing the different divisions of yoga practice, by performing devotional service, and by exhibiting the process of devotional service containing the symptoms of both attachment and detachment, by understanding the science of self-realization, and by developing a strong sense of detachment. One who is expert in understanding the different processes of self-realization realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is represented in the material world as well as in transcendence. So the goal here is to realize the Lord in the world, which is what we're going to be talking about at the Bhakti Center this evening. How to realize the Lord in the world. And in transcendence, how to realize the Lord in his abode. Okay, so without looking at the board or your phone or a book, can anybody remember some of what's there? Long list. Anybody remember any of them? Yes. So doing the senses. Yes.
Philosophical research.
Philosophical research.
Distributing charity.
Distributing charity. Austerity. Detachment. Controlling the mind. Sacrifices. Excellent. Yes.
Performing devotional service.
Performing devotional service. Yes.
Accepting the renounced order of life.
Accepting the renounced order of life. Okay, so it's a long purport. Actually, it's more difficult to give class on a very complicated verse and purport than a very simple one. Because you're like, what do I pick? Okay, so it is a long, complicated purport. Srila Prabhupada's purport. As is stated in the previous verse, one has to follow the principles of the scriptures. There are different prescribed duties for persons in the different social and spiritual orders. Now here Prabhupada is going to talk about the spiritual orders. Here it is stated that performance of fruitive activities and sacrifices and distribution of charity are activities meant for persons who are in the householder order of society. There are 4 orders of the social system: brahmacharya, grahastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. For the grahastha or householders, he's just basically repeating now the same thing. Performance of sacrifices, distribution of charity, and action according to prescribed duties are especially recommended. So action according to prescribed duties means the varnas. So Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, those actions are actually for those who are grahasthas, because those are means of livelihood. So when you're brahmachari, you're a student. When you're vanaprastha, you're retired, and when you're a sannyasi, you're civilly dead. Oh. So students, retired people, and dead people don't have careers, right? So this, when Prabhupada's talking about action according to prescribed duties, he's talking about varna. Similarly, austerity, study of Vedic literature, and philosophical research are meant for the vanaprasthas or retired persons. I was very happy when I read this because I love to do philosophical research. Study of the Vedic literature from the bona fide spiritual master is meant for the brahmachari or student. Admendriya Jaya, control of the mind and taming of the senses is meant for persons in the renounced order of life. Does that mean brahmacharis, grahastas, and vanaprasthas shouldn't control their mind and senses? Okay, just checking on that. Also, does this mean that brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis shouldn't give in charity? What's our evidence that everyone should give in charity? Yeah?
Charity can also be in terms of knowledge.
Charity can also what?
In terms of knowledge.
Yes, you can give many kinds of charity. Excellent.
Yajna, dana, tapas.
Yes, exactly. Where Krishna says that yajna, jnana, and tapas have to be done by everyone, even great souls. All these different activities are prescribed for different persons so that they may be elevated to the platform of self-realization and from there to Krishna consciousness devotional service. So Prabhupada's talking about a gradual elevation, correct? The words bhakti yogena chaivahi mean that whatever is to be performed as described in verse 34, whether yoga or sacrifice or fruit of activity or study of Vedic literature or philosophical research or accepting of the renounced order of life, is to be executed in bhakti yoga. The words chaivahi, according to Sanskrit grammar, indicate that one must perform all these activities mixed with devotional service. Otherwise, such activities will not produce any fruit. Will they produce some fruit?
Yes.
What kind of fruit will they produce?
Maybe fruity fruits. Fruity fruits.
Fruited fruits. Okay, fruited fruits. Sounds like an artificial drink. Juicy juice contains 1% juice. So fruited fruits. They'll give you karma. So if you do these activities without devotional service, they'll give you other births in this world and they'll give you karma. So why is Prabhupada saying that they won't produce any fruit? Any spiritual fruit, any real fruit. Karmic fruit is just like a reflection. Yes, Krishna describes Maya as a reflection that appears to be in darkness. So if you have a reflection of an apple, is it a fruit? Yes and no, right? If I show you a picture of an apple, I say, is this an apple? You'd say yes, but does it have any juice in it? No. Any prescribed activity must be performed for the sake of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9:27, Yat karoshi yat agnasi. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you sacrifice, whatever austerities you undergo, and whatever charities you give, the result should be given to the Supreme Lord. Now this is a very interesting verse. There's a almost identical verse in the Bible in Corinthians. And I find it fascinating that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Ramananda Roy that this verse was external. And, in meditating on the reason why Mahaprabhu would say that this verse was external is because you can still do this in materialistic consciousness. You can say, I am a kshatriya. I am a householder. I am a banker. I am a sannyasi. I am an Indian. I am a Brazilian. I am a this, and I am doing my activities for the Lord. So it can still be on the platform of the external world. And most religionists in this world have some concept of this, that I'm going to do my activities in the world for the glory of God. But they're thinking, I am this body and I am this mind. Going on, the word eva is added, indicating that one must execute activities in such a way. Unless one adds devotional service to our activities, he cannot achieve the desired result. When bhakti yoga is prominent in every activity, then the ultimate goal is sure. One has to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. After many, many births, one approaches the Supreme Person, Krishna, and surrenders unto him, knowing that he is everything. So Prabhupada's again here talking about a gradual process, isn't he? Is this clear? Very gradual, like lifetimes gradual, not 1 week gradual. Also in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Bhaktiram yagatapasam, for anyone who is undergoing rigid austerity or for anyone performing different kinds of sacrifices, the beneficiary is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the proprietor of all planets, and he is the friend of every living soul. The words dharmeno bhya chinena mean that the bhakti yoga process contains two symptoms, namely attachment for the Supreme Lord and detachment from all material affinities. There are two symptoms of advancement in the process of devotional service. So this is a very important point to know whether or not I'm advancing. And this is a point Srila Prabhupada makes very often, that we don't need to take a certificate from others to see whether or not we're advancing. We can judge ourselves. And Prabhupada will often refer to this verse from the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam that he refers to here. There are two symptoms of advancement in the process of devotional service, just as there are two processes taking place while eating. A hungry man feels strength and satisfaction from eating, and at the same time he gradually becomes detached from eating anymore. Similarly, with the execution of devotional service, real knowledge develops and one becomes detached from all material activities. So the two symptoms are, am I becoming more attached to Krishna, and am I becoming more detached from Maya? In no other activity but devotional service is there such detachment from matter and attachment for the Supreme. There are 9 different processes to increase this attachment to the Supreme Lord. That's also very significant, that the purpose of these processes is to increase our attachment to the Supreme Lord, which is exactly what Krishna says in one of my favorite verses, Bhagavad Gita 12:9, where he says the purpose of doing abhyas yoga or sadhana bhakti is to develop icha, to develop a desire to love the Lord. Hearing, chanting, remembering, worshiping, serving the Lord, making friendship, praying, offering everything, and serving the lotus feet of the Lord. The process for increasing detachment from material affinities are explained in verse 36. One can achieve elevation to the higher planetary systems like the heavenly kingdom by executing one's prescribed duties and by performing sacrifices. When one is transcendental to such desires because of accepting the renounced order of life, he can understand the Brahman feature of the Supreme. And when one is able to see his real constitutional position, he sees all other processes and becomes situated in the stage of pure devotional service. Just that right there is very deep, just that very small section of the purport, that you become detached from the world, you attain to the Brahman platform, at the platform of Brahman. You can understand everything, all the processes of yoga, and you become attached to the personality of Godhead. At that time, you can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. Understanding of the Supreme Person is called Atma Tattva Arobhadena, which means understanding of one's real constitutional position. If one actually understands one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord, he becomes detached from the service of the material world. So this is kind of the essence of how we develop detachment in bhakti, by becoming paramdrisva nivartate, by having a higher. You eat a real apple, and therefore you're not very interested in the picture of the apple. Everyone engages in some sort of service. If one does not know one's constitutional position, one engages in the service of his personal gross body or his family, society, or country. But as soon as one is able to see his constitutional position, the word swadrik means one who is able to see, he becomes detached from such material service and engages himself in devotional service. As long as one is in the modes of material nature and is performing the duties prescribed in the scriptures, he can be elevated to higher planetary systems, where the predominating deities are material representations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, like the sun god, the moon god, the air god, Brahma, and Lord Shiva. All the different demigods are material representations of the Supreme Lord. By material activities, one can approach only such demigods, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 9:25, Yanti Deva Vrata Devan. Those who are attached to the demigods and who perform the prescribed duties can approach the abodes of the demigods. In this way, one can go to the planet of the Pitas or forefathers. Similarly, one who fully understands the real position of his life adopts devotional service and realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, because I'm not going to read all the Sanskrit over again. I'll just read the English translation again. And when does this class end? 9? I'll just read the translation again. By performing fruitive activities and sacrifices, by distributing charity, by performing austerities, by studying Vedic literature, various literatures, and conducting philosophical research, by controlling the mind, by subduing the senses, by accepting the renounced order of life, and by performing the prescribed duties of one's social order, by performing the different divisions of yoga practice, by performing devotional service, and by exhibiting the process of devotional service containing the symptoms of both attachment and detachment, by understanding the science of self-realization, and by developing a strong sense of detachment. One who is expert at understanding the different processes of self-realization realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is represented in the material world as well as in transcendence. So would we like to realize God? Everybody like to know God? That's why I came to the Hare Krishna movement, by the way. I wanted to find God. How can I find God? And I was looking how to find God in everything all the time. You know, I didn't just want some system where, okay, you meditate for a certain number of hours a day, or you pray for a certain number of hours, you know, you go to some place of worship, and then the rest of the time you're in forgetfulness. I wanted everything to be spiritual. And so this is what Srila Prabhupada, it's interesting, I find it fascinating that Prabhupada's translating Saguna and Nirguna as understanding the Lord as represented in the material world and as understanding the Lord in transcendence. So this means in the material world, it would mean that with every breath I have the realization that Krishna is joining with the air of life in my body. With every movement of my body, I have realization that Krishna is my ability. With every insight, I have realization that Krishna is giving me intelligence, and indeed he says he is the intelligence, he is the wisdom. He says he's a source of light and luminous objects. When I look at the light on my phone, or the light on the ceiling, when I go into the sunlight, when I see the birds and hear the birds, even the pigeons, and I think, oh, the birds are evidence of Krishna's artistry. I see the ocean and bodies of water I must see, that I see Krishna in everything in the world. And I'm able to connect everything in the world. Yat karoshi, yat ignasi, yat jahosi dasi, yat tapasisi kante, yat tat kurushvamadarpanam. I'm able to connect everything. I'm able to connect my stage of life, my occupation, everything to Krishna. And then in transcendence, to know God beyond the world, to know Krishna playing his flute and herding the cows and walking by the bank of the Yamuna and dancing with the gopis and stealing the butter and being on the battlefield of Kurukshetra and killing the demons and to know Krishna in transcendence with his devotees, to know ultimate reality. So everybody would like to know both of those things, to be fully conscious of Krishna in transcendence, and also to be aware and conscious and connected with the Lord in all of our activities. Yes? Okay. So then we need to do these things. But the most important thing here is, of course, of all of the list of things, the most important one is devotional service, bhakti yoga. So that's the most important thing, to do devotional service. And then once we do devotional service, then we can know how to live in the world as a bhakti yogi. And how will we know we're doing it right? What's our evidence procedure that we're doing bhakti yoga right, and that we'll get there? Attachment to Krishna and detachment from Maya. All right, so let's first look at the most important thing, which is bhakti yoga. And Srila Prabhupada's listing in this purport, what's he listing about bhakti yoga? The 9 processes. With the purpose, right? There are 9 different processes to increase this attachment to the Supreme Lord. So that's the purpose. Prabhupada sometimes talks about, when he was growing up in India, there was arranged marriage when people were children. That's now illegal in most of the world. But there was this concept that if you wanted to prevent illicit sex in society, that was the concept. You wanted to have that part of people's life settled so they weren't disturbed. So when people were children, like the girl was 5 and the boy was 7 or something like that, so then they arranged the marriage. And Prabhupada talks about at that time, the boy and the girl didn't have any attachment to each other. 5, 7-year-old kids, they don't have that kind of attraction. He said, but the families would get together and they'd say, oh, bring some sweets to your husband. And the little girls would bring. And Prabhupada said, by doing this gradually, they would form some attachment. That was the idea, that by the time they were actually old enough to actually be married, they would have already formed some attachment. So we have, Prabhupada's talking about in this purport, we have a constitutional position of being attached to Krishna in a particular way. Each of us has an inherent constitutional position that I want to serve Krishna in a way that, and we're attached to that. I really want to be, Krishna's necklace, or I really want to be Krishna's cow, or I really want to be Krishna's friend and, play ball with him. Or I really want to protect Krishna, and I really want to feed him, or I really want to dance with Krishna in the moonlight. And we have some attachment to this. I really want to serve Krishna in this way. That's already there. But it's sleeping. It's dormant. Which literally means that it's sleeping. It's something, again, Prabhupada would compare this to the young boy and girl, where their natural attraction is, it's sleeping when you're a child. It's not awakened. So we're not aware of that. Most people in this world, they don't have any awareness. Oh, I have some love for a personal God in a particular way. That I have a constitutional position of, being the bee around Krishna's garland, or being one of, they have no awareness of this at all. So we want to awaken that. And these processes are meant to awaken that. Now, when one starts to awaken that, the processes are also meant to exhibit it. So to use a very ordinary example, right? If a boy wants to awaken the girl's love for him, he might give her flowers or jewelry. And if I give her flowers or jewelry, then maybe she'll love me. You follow? And if she already loves him, then if he will still give her flowers and jewelry to express that love. So the process of bhakti is like that. They're the things that the liberated souls, the pure devotees, do to express and increase their existing love. And they're things that we conditioned souls do to awaken that love. Can you follow that? It both expresses existing love and awakens love. They're the activities of love and the activities of attachment. We're basically practicing attachment. I mean, another simple analogy would be if you had some married couple who are having marital problems and they go to a counselor, and the counselor gives them some work to do. Do these things to help revive the love you had when you got married. Right? Or even if it's not a romantic relationship, even if you're having, some problem with someone in the ashram, and you go to some mediator or some counselor, and they're saying, why don't you do some service for each other? Do some service with each other. Have this way of talking to. They give you some way to bring out that original relationship. So that's what the rishis are doing. That's what the shastra is doing. That's what guru is doing. This is the way to do that. So it's not a mechanical process. It's so important to understand that it's not a mechanical process. It's not a mechanical process. Krishna is not a machine. It's not that, okay, did I chant my 16 rounds? Check. Follow the principles today? Check. Did I go to Mangalarti today? Check. Did I read the Shastra today? Check. Okay, where's my Krishna Prema? Like it's a vending machine or something, You put in the right coins and you push the right buttons and you get your whatever. That would be just like, I give this analogy a lot, some guy cheats on his wife and then he just comes, I'm really sorry. She said, well, that's a good start. Okay, now you've got to change your behavior. You've got to do this, you've got to do this. And then if he comes to her and said, well, I did this, let me back in. She's like, no, you missed the whole point. Do you follow what I'm saying? It's a question of reviving that attachment. So hearing about Krishna, we want to hear about Krishna so we get more attached to him. So we can meditate on what we've heard about. Even hearing that Krishna is a taste of water. And so when, you drink water, and you're like, wow, it's cooling, it's refreshing. Wow, Krishna is so wonderful. Some way, what to speak about hearing of Krishna's transcendent activities, but we hear about how Krishna is manifesting in the world, we hear about how Krishna is manifesting in transcendence, so that we think, oh, I want to do that. I want to be with this person. I want to associate with this person. I want to serve this person. And chanting about Krishna, chanting Krishna's name so we want to be with him, talking about him. People talk about, whatever, a place they want to go to or some person they want. So we want to talk about Krishna so that we want to be with him. And then remembering him, thinking about him. We tend to remember, what did I do yesterday? What do I want to do tomorrow? What's on my to-do? What did this person say? What did this person say? What's going on here? But to remember Krishna. Why? Again, to be attached to him. Not as, oh, did I remember Krishna today? Not as a job to do. And to worship Krishna also. Again, not like how many times do I circle the incense, but to really think about, here I am with God. Yes, there you are, right there with Govardhan. That you're with Govardhan. It's an incredible form of the Lord, right? Who takes pleasure by having the devotees walk on him. And not just the human-like devotees, but also the cows and the goats and the dogs even walk all over his body and providing jewels and caves. And I get to fan Govardhan. To really meditate when one is worshiping. Who am I worshiping? Who is Govinda? I was just looking at Radha Govinda and thinking about Srila Prabhupada and how Prabhupada must have felt looking at Radha Govinda. Serving the Lord. Again, serving not, well, let me do some service so I'll get prasadam. and a bed to sleep in the ashram. But serving because I love Krishna and I want to do something for him. Just like, again, in this world, we see someone and we think, oh, let me help you. Right? Let me help you. Hearing Prabhupada saying this really extraordinary thing today. It's so funny because I've listened to Prabhupada's lectures so many times. And even so, every time I hear them, I hear something that I feel like I haven't heard before. Isn't that weird? With the books, it's like that too. No matter how many times you read them, you find something and you think, did I ever read that before? So Prabhupada was saying that Krishna doesn't say, sleep on the chariot and I'll fight the war for you. He said, you should fight for justice. So I've heard that many times where Prabhupada said, Arjuna doesn't sleep on the chariot and Krishna fights. But that thing, you should fight for justice. I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to fight for justice, of course. Anyway, I'm not Kshatriya, Grahasta, but that concept, to do some service for Krishna. Not that, I'm just going to sit in one place and let Krishna manage the world. I get out and do something for Krishna. It really struck me to do some service for Krishna. Making friendship with Krishna. Prabhupada talks about that a little earlier in the purport where he talks about Bhaktiram Ekatapasam Sarvalok Maheshwaram Suhridam Sarvabhutanam. Krishna is my best friend. Am I his friend? Satyananda Maharaj likes to say this. We're always worried about, can I trust Krishna? But the question we should be asking is, can Krishna trust me? Am I reliable? Right? I'm sure we all know people who say, yeah, I'm going to do this, and nothing happens. Yes, we've all know people like that? I'll be there for you, and they're not. So when we say to Krishna, I'm going to be there for you, Lord. I'm going to be there for you. Are we there? Are we there physically? Are we there mentally? Are we there emotionally? Are we Krishna's friend? Praying, which of course one prays with the body in offering obeisances, one says notable prayers in one's own prayers, offering everything. Offering everything, full surrender, that's a whole, much more than we can discuss in this class. But full surrender of body, mind, words, and full surrender of body, mind, and soul. There's actually two different categories of surrender. And serving the lotus feet of the Lord. Serving the lotus feet of the Lord includes serving Tulsi Devi, serving the devotees, going to holy places, like that. So all of these things we should be doing with the aim, with the goal of increasing our attachment to Krishna. Our japa, our gayatri, our worship, our reading. How can I fall in love more with Krishna? How can I become more attached to Krishna? Now, when we're doing that, we also need to live in the world. Even if you're a sannyasi, you still have to take a bath and brush your teeth. You still have to live in the world. You still have to do things in the world to live. So we have some specific dharmas to do in the world according to our varna and ashram. Ashram is basically about how old you are, where you are in your natural biological life cycle. What's the natural, as Prabhupada would say, psychophysical needs at different points in life, and how can you spiritualize that? Usually children study, usually people in the prime of life are interested in romance and money and doing something in the world. Usually by midlife, you're kind of like, okay, I made my contribution to the world. Of course, nowadays people at midlife have a midlife crisis and they just like marry a new person. You know. And instead of traveling to holy places, they travel to Disneyland. But at that, there's a natural detachment that happens at midlife. And then in old age, one prepares for death. This is a natural biological phenomenon. And to take that into, there's different duties that one does for Krishna in those stages. And then in the prime of life, when one wants to earn a livelihood, one generally has a family. One wants to maintain one's family. One wants to make a mark in the world. One wants to do something in the world. So then you do that in one of the four varnas. And we'll be talking, we're going to have an in-depth seminar on the varnas tomorrow at the Bhakti Center. This is my plug from 10 to 5. We'll be looking. What is it? What do the four varnas mean? What does it mean to do your duty? What happens when you do someone else's duty? And what would society look like if everybody did their duty in the varnas? So you can be someone whose primary interest in life is contributing truth and wisdom to the world, or someone whose primary interest in life is contributing justice, morals, ethics, or someone whose primary interest in life is expanding wealth and prosperity for everyone, or someone whose primary interest is creating functionality and beauty. So in whatever inclination one has, one does that also for Krishna. And those dharmas are different. They're not the same. And what's dharma in one ashram is adharma in another. If you're a grahasta, to look at your wife and say, you're the most beautiful woman in the world, that's your dharma. But if you're a brahmachari, you shouldn't be going to some woman and saying that. It becomes adharma. You follow? Right? What's dharma in one ashram is adharma in another. And the same with the varnas. What's the dharma in one varna becomes adharma in another. The kshatriyas and the vaishyas are supposed to have an expansive mentality. The shudras and the brahmanas are supposed to have a satisfied mentality. Prabhupada says lying is compulsory for the vaishyas. But being straightforward and truthful is compulsory for the brahmanas. If a brahmana takes up the duty of a vaishya and they're straightforward and truthful, their business will fail and the world will starve. So these different dharmas are dharmas in their right place. Does everyone understand that? Like if you take a heart muscle and you put it in the lungs, it's going to cause havoc. It can't do its dharma. So we do the appropriate dharma according to our stage of life, according to our psychophysical nature in this life, which isn't our real self. That's not our real self. It's just the vehicle we happen to have. You know, somebody has this kind of car, somebody has this kind of car. And they drive differently. You can't drive a Volkswagen Beetle like you can drive a Tesla. It just won't work. So you just, what kind of car do I have in this life? Or maybe I don't have a car. Maybe I have a bicycle. Maybe I have a plane. Maybe I have a boat. Maybe all I have is a skateboard. I don't know. Whatever vehicle I have in this life. I take that and use it according to the way it's supposed to be used for Krishna. So you have this overarching bhakti yoga that's saturating your life with attachment to Krishna. And seeing Krishna in the world and seeing Krishna in transcendence. And within that, we do our duties in the world as a devotee. And this is the main message of the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna, do your duty, don't go do someone else's duty, but do your duty above the modes, Nistrigunya Bhavarjuna, and do your duty for me. With realization that you're my servant, that I'm your friend, that you're my friend. And then there's also dharma that's general for everyone. Like everybody should perform some sacrifices. Sacrifices, yajna, means some connection with the divine. And everybody should do some austerities. And everybody should give in charity. And somebody was mentioning how there's different kinds of charity. It's actually one of the principles of Varna Dharma, that you can give in charity not just money, you can give it in charity according to what kind of prosperity you have. So there's many ways, but everyone should be giving in charity. No one should be selfish. Everyone should give in charity, everyone should connect with the Lord, and everyone should perform some austerity. So there's a general dharma that's for everyone. Now, how do you know that you're doing it right? How do you know you're doing Bhakti Yoga right? And how do you know you're doing your activities in the world in Bhakti Yoga right? What was that again? What were our two symptoms? Attachment to Krishna and detachment from Maya. So when you're eating, you should become satisfied, you get relief from hunger, and you get detached from eating anymore. And that's how you know. You don't have to ask somebody, did I eat enough? Unless you have some kind of disease. Right? You know, am I satisfied? And we usually trust people like that, correct? If someone says, can I have some more, we trust them, that they know how much they can eat. And if they say, no, I'm full, we trust them, that they have some sense of what they need. So we should be noticing in our own life, am I becoming more attached to Krishna? Am I more attached to Krishna than I was a year ago? Am I more attached to Krishna than I was when I first walked in the door of a Hare Krishna temple? To Krishna. The person Krishna. Bhagavan Krishna. Not some theoretical idea of God. Not just philosophy. Am I more attached to Krishna? Do I think about Krishna? I remember realizing, it was actually when my godbrother, Sridhar Maharaj, was leaving the planet. I realized that I wanted to change my way of evaluating my day from productivity to attachment. How many minutes today did I spend really meditating on Krishna? How full of attachment was my processes of bhakti? I thought, Urmila, you've already gotten to the point that you know you're going to check all the boxes. You don't need to, what do they say, you only do what's measurable? Any of you who know anything about this sort of thing? I thought, I don't have to measure that anymore for I already know it's already given. Am I doing my worship with attachment? Am I chanting my japa with attachment? Am I chanting Gayatri with attachment? Am I reading the books with attachment? How am I dealing with other people in the world even? Am I dealing with the person who helped us at the self-checkout? Where do we go? Whole Foods? Am I dealing with them in a way that will please Krishna? And how am I dealing with the annoyances in life? Does everyone have some annoyances every day? Am I dealing with that in a way that will please Krishna? Am I using the so-called positive things and so-called negative things as impetus to increase my attachment to Krishna? Am I really thinking about Krishna? Am I thinking of Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes? How much? How deeply? With how much love? With how much affection? Does my heart ever melt? And then detachment. Now, detachment is a funny, interesting one. So there's this gentleman who's a devotee of Krishna, but he's also a Catholic monk. Perhaps some of you have met him, Mr. Thomas. He's a very famous Catholic monk. He's written a lot of best-selling books, and he can draw a crowd of 100,000 people to his lectures, very well known within the Catholic community. And I remember first or second time I met him, and I was asking him how did he decide to be a monk, and he said, well, for me, celibacy is a charism, it's not a discipline. So I looked at what the Catholics mean by charism. It means a gift. And I thought, when one takes up austerities as a discipline, there's always some danger there. Because it's predicated on just like willpower and mental determination. And I'm sure all of us know that our willpower and mental determination is not completely dependable. Does anyone here have absolutely dependable willpower? Anybody? Okay. I'm not the only one who sometimes eats another piece of cheesecake. So we don't, just to depend on our willpower and our determination also can be interpreted by us as repression. So there are many people who think that detachment is repression. And what does repression lead to? Repression leads to anger or fall down. Or hard-heartedness. Those are your three options. Anger, hard-heartedness, or fall down. Repression, willpower. I'm going to be austere and detached. The Christian writer C.S. Lewis, in his book Screwtape Letters, he talks about how that one way of manipulating humans is to make them hate sexuality without actually being free from it. And so that when it explodes in them, it explodes in a very base and degraded way. And I thought, wow, that's really insightful. So we're not looking, Maya's very clever. And she can make repression and aversion look to us like detachment. Or she can make us feel that just willpower and determination and being expert in repression is detachment. And it isn't. And we've seen in our Hare Krishna movement many people who thought that way have some very embarrassing situations. Any of you who've been around for a while. So that's not what detachment means. Detachment is neutrality. Just like even in ordinary life, they say the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is neutrality, indifference. Prabhupada says that at bhava, one sees the naked form of material desires. One just doesn't feel any attraction. And I think I'm relatively sure that we all feel this way, at least toward meat eating, right? There's no repression involved. We just have no interest. Am I correct? We just simply have no interest. There's nothing that's pulling us. There's that, if we think about eating meat, we're like, I don't want to do that. Why would I want to do that? So that's real detachment. You're just like, why do I want to do that? Why do I want to try to eat a picture of an apple? Like, why? You don't hate a picture of an apple. It's a picture of an apple. Oh. But you don't want to eat it. You're just like, why? There's no, what? Rasa. What's the analogy? Chewing the chewed. Prabhupada, we don't have much experience with chewing sugar cane, right? Most of us don't chew sugar cane. You chew. Prabhupada likes to chew on sugar cane. So if someone's already chewed on sugar cane, you pick it up and there's nothing left in it. Maybe some of us have experience with chewing gum. You know, you chew it and chew it and chew it, and then there's nothing left in it anymore. It is. So Maya is an illusion of rasa. It's not actual rasa. It's a reflection or a picture, or the Shastra compares it to a dream. We've all eaten food in dreams. Have everybody eaten food in dreams? But you wake up and you're still hungry. There isn't any nourishment. So it's a natural detachment that you have the reality and you're just like, there's no interest. And the main thing that we want to become detached from, my dear friends, is our false ego. They're thinking, I'm the Bhoktaram Yagatapasam. I'm the Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. I'm the Suridam. I'm the controller. I'm the enjoyer. I'm going to help everybody. I'm wonderful. Do you want to know one of the prime symptoms to tell whether or not you're detached from your false ego? How do we react when someone criticizes us in front of somebody else? Especially other people that we want to impress in some way. How do we respond when we're criticized for something we didn't do? How do we respond when other people get credit for our work? How do we respond when other people have more of something than we have, including spirituality? That's the real thing. There are atheists who are celibate, vegetarian. The real thing we want to look for is, am I detached from my false ego? Am I attached from thinking, I'm the Lord? All right, so we want to do the process of Bhakti Yoga, which are the 9 processes. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. And within that context of Bhakti Yoga, we live and work in the world. We want to live and work in the world in the way that pleases Krishna according to our particular appropriate varna and ashram. And then we can judge how much am I getting attached to the person Krishna and how much am I being detached from Ishwaraham, Aham Bhogi, Siddhaham, and so forth. Kartaham, Iti Manyate. How much am I getting detached from that concept that I am the enjoyer of the world? So it is 9 o'clock. It's actually 9:02. So I guess we don't have time for questions. It was a very, very long purport. So what's the protocol here?
I think we can take some questions.
Okay. Yes.
So basically the section of Prahlad Maharaj, so we always hear this section where the Prahlad Maharaj at the age of 5, he started preaching to his classmates.
Okay.
And
For those online, he's saying that Prahlad started preaching to his classmates when he was 5, yes?
Yeah, so at that time his teachers tried teaching him diplomacy, politics, and then something about necessary for a king.
Okay.
He didn't learn any of those things. And he was only concentrating on the Vaishnava Dharma of preaching and talking about Krishna. And then when Hiranyakashipu died, then he was made the king. Prahlad was made the king. So I just want to understand that. You were talking about the Varnashrama and then you were talking about...
Oh, what a thoughtful, intelligent question. I think what you're saying, let me see if I can paraphrase what you're saying. So Prahlad Maharaj at 5, he's not interested in his teachers telling him about diplomacy and thinking about friends and enemies, but then Lord Nrsingadev makes him the king of the demons, where he's going to have to use those things, isn't he?
Yeah, and then he, basically, practically it doesn't work, unless you are trained in those things, it's tough to basically manage anything.
So unless you're saying if he's not trained in those things, but you're saying he rejected those trainings, so how did he become a good king?
Yeah, maybe Nrsimhadev blessed it, but in this section I just want to ask, will that really work in practical world?
You know, it's interesting when Prabhupada was speaking about, because Prahlad Maharaj was there in the Brahmachari ashram, sort of kind of ish, right? He was in the Gurukula. And when Prabhupada was giving lectures on the Brahmachari ashram in 1976 in Mumbai, and he was going back and forth between talking about children in Gurukul and adult men living in the Brahmachari ashram. He was conflating the two, which I find interesting and expected, I suppose, that the Brahmachari ashram is meant to be a school for training. And one of the points Srila Prabhupada made is that the devotee should be daksha. He said, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not getting the exact words, but he was saying that just because you're a Vaishnava, you shouldn't be callous. Of course, in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, Prabhupada talks about being callous. But he said you shouldn't be callous to the things of this world. And he said the brahmachari should know something of everything and everything of something. You should know something of everything and everything of something. Because the brahmachari ashram is meant for training. Even if you're going to go straight from the brahmachari ashram to the vanaprastha or sannyasa ashram, you have to know how to deal in the world as a preacher. And most people are going to go to the grihastha ashram. So Prabhupada also says in the second canto, you get specific training for a livelihood. So this was specific training for a livelihood. My own understanding is that Prahlad Maharaj wasn't rejecting the techniques of management of a kingdom. What he was rejecting was the mentality. Now the Bhagavatam is full of Vaishnava Kshatriyas. Gopi Pranadana Prabhu one time was making the point that they're much more interesting than Brahmanas. He said if it was the Brahmanas sat down and they meditated, and then they meditated some more, and then they studied the Shastras some more. Whereas the Kshatriyas, they're fighting the enemies, and they're ruling, and they're doing all these exciting things. But they're Rajarshis. They're saintly persons, even though we're supposed to actually be a saintly person no matter what you do. Even if you're a plumber, you're supposed to be a saintly plumber. This Traigunya Bhavarjana, one is to be above the modes of nature no matter what one's doing. And Sanda and Marka, they were teaching, actually feel this person is my enemy, this person is my friend. Like we have Maharaj Yudhisthira who didn't see anyone as his enemy. Well, what does that mean? He was fighting in the Battle of Kurukshetra too, And it's also interesting, isn't Krishna telling Arjuna this? See friends, enemies, and the neutral all equally? And it says in the 12th, one who sees friends and enemies neutrally is very dear to me. Okay, now go fight your enemy. What? Not because they're our enemy. We're not fighting them because they're our enemy. We're not doing, the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas have to be diplomatic. Shudras and Brahmanas are not supposed to be diplomatic. But the Vaishyas and Kshatriyas are supposed to be diplomatic. If the Kshatriyas aren't diplomatic, there's going to be a war. That's why you don't have Brahmanas running governments. So they have to know the art of diplomacy. Actually, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada talks about how the devotees were using diplomacy in Krishna's service to arrange for Mahaprabhu to meet with Maharaj Prataparudra. So that has to be there, but without that mentality, with the mentality, I'm doing this for Krishna. This is true for everything. Don't tell your wife she's the most beautiful woman in the world, so she'll be nice to you. Tell your wife she's the most beautiful woman in the world because it's your duty to take care of this jiva, and that's what the female psychology is going to need, and so that's what you're doing. Because Krishna gave you this particular jiva to take care of. And that's the way to take care of her. Not because you think I'm going to get something back. So Prahlad Maharaj was rejecting this merchant mentality, and he was rejecting this manipulative mentality and this false ego mentality. But I'm sure he learned all the lessons. He was a pretty good learner. After all, he learned in the womb from Narada Muni. He was a pretty good student. But I do think it's kind of funny that Nrsingadev says, okay, now I want you to be the king of the demons. And rule them and bring them. He wanted, because Prahlad had already demonstrated that in the school, that he was bringing the demons to bhakti. And so Nrsingadev says, all right, you did a great job in the school, I'm going to promote you to the whole kingdom. And I don't know what Prahlad Maharaj thought about that. I'm going to be the king of the demons. Is that all right? In every situation, one should be thinking, Krishna has me, and there's a nice letter to Jayapataka Maharaj in 1972 about the secret of surrender. That whatever is meant to be, I'm doing that. Krishna has arranged, I'm in this situation, whatever the situation is. I'm in this situation because there's some service here. and I am a servant. What service can I do for Krishna here? And that's going to depend to a large extent on, your gender, your age, your psychophysical nature. But that was such a thoughtful question. Thank you. I wish everybody asked questions like that. Does anyone else have any other? Now everyone's going to be afraid to ask anything. Yes.
Krishna, thank you so much for a very insightful class. You mentioned about this move and mindset and focus of consciously doing things to increase our interaction with Krishna. Using my experience, I find that sometimes over time I can slip away and miss doing the checkbox. Did this, I did this, I did this today. So how do we, or what does it take to keep that mindset forefront of the consciousness?
That's also an excellent question. So for those of you who couldn't hear him, he was saying that how do we keep that consciousness that I'm doing this to increase my attachment to Krishna? How do we prevent us from getting mechanical? The problem is that our biology is geared to create habits, unconscious habits. It's a very important time-saving device. And those people who have some kind of neurodiversity where they can't do that really struggle in life. Things recede into the background for us. How to drive a car, how to ride a bicycle, how do I brush my teeth, what sock do I put on first? We don't think every day, oh my God, what sock do I put on first? It becomes a habit. Just like one time we moved to a house that was very close to our old house. And about a week after we moved, I was driving back from somewhere and I took the exit to the old house. Just, oh my goodness, what am I doing? It's on automatic pilot. So the majority of our repeated activities in life get put into the automatic pilot thing. It's a nice biological system. So then we can concentrate on what's more important. Well, the problem is, if we're doing bhakti as a daily repeated activity, it's very easy for it to go to like, what sock do I put on first? It can very easily get it, or what exit do I take? It can very easily slip into that. In fact, there's going to be a tendency for that to happen. The fact that there's a tendency for that to happen doesn't mean that you're a terrible, horrible person. It just means you have a natural biological system, and that's how it tends to work. So, number one, don't hate yourself for the fact that there's that tendency. Just like there's a tendency for any organization to become bureaucratic in time as it gets bigger and older. Or there's a tendency for your room to get dirty. You're not a terrible person because you cleaned your room yesterday and there's some dirt on the floor today. There's that tendency. In fact, there's a whole tendency in the material world for things to go to adharma. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata bhutanam adharmasya. Dharma tends to become adharma very, very quickly. But to recognize that, so what are you going to do to keep course correcting? Well, one of your main thing is good sadhu sangha. Get the right sadhu sangha. Have some association with people who are attached to Krishna. And hang out with them, do things with them. If you can't do it in your own physical proximity, do it virtually. Jai Kali Yuga technology that we can use in Krishna's service. You can have a virtual sangha with people who are attached to Krishna. And of course, we have Srila Prabhupada, who's more attached to Krishna than Srila Prabhupada. But then we run the risk of reading Prabhupada's books and hearing Prabhupada's lectures go into that habit thingy. So, associating with Prabhupada with that in mind. That's the top thing is association. And this concept that that's the top thing is part of the essence of Srila Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. We're talking about what stimulates love. Yes, the vibhav, what stimulates love. And there's two categories, alambana and udipana. Alambana is what Prabhupada calls basic. What's the basic thing that stimulates our love. And in alambana, there's two subcategories, Vishaya and Ashraya. Vishaya is Krishna himself. Ashraya is other devotees who have a similar kind of love to our own, like-minded persons. So on the higher realms, that means I want to love Krishna as a cowherd boy and I want to hang out with other cowherd boys and meditate on other cowherd boys. But even as sadhakas who have no idea whether they're a flower or a cowherd boy, people who are going to encourage you in your devotion. That ashraya, that's a stimulus. Does that make sense? If I want to increase my friendship with someone, I hang out with other people who are also friends with that someone. The husband and wife increase their love for their children by seeing their spouse's love for their children, or seeing their parents' love for their children, or their brothers and their brothers and sisters' love for the nephews and nieces, or grandparents' love for the and that increases the parents' love. So that's the big thing. And then the other thing is that choose the items of bhakti that for you are very nourishing, and make sure that you do them regularly. Choose items of bhakti. I mean, within those 9 processes are big umbrellas over the 64 items of bhakti. And some of those 64 items are just one simple thing like charnamrita, and some of those 64 items have sub and sub and sub under them. Choose some item, and Prabhupada writes about this in Nectar Devotion, do things according to your taste. Again, this is operative both at low levels of sadhaka, so to speak, and at higher levels of sadhana. So if you find that, well, when I sing bhajans, that particularly, do that every day. Sing a bhajan every day. Find some time in your day for the things that really nourish you. And that's not going to necessarily be what really nourishes the person in the top bunk over you. That might be a little different. So those 2 things, sangha, getting the right sangha, and if you've got the wrong sangha, like with all respects, choose different, and what is particularly nourishing to you. And to not hate yourself for the fact that that tendency is there. It's there, and one needs to make some deliberate effort. Did you have a question, or should we stop now? Or?
I'll ask the person.
You'll ask later, okay. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for tolerating that somehow the F train didn't show up, and so I was late. And thank you very much for this opportunity to serve Srila Prabhupada at the lotus feet of Radha Govinda. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.